Hello, welcome back to another Office After Hours. This is right after Adam Koebel's Office Hours show for people who want to keep on talking about those topics or ask me questions or whatever. We did one last week and people liked it, so we decided to do it again. This is live, and I'm just going to hang out here for a minute and see if anybody wants to ask questions or not. We shall see. We have one viewer. Hello, viewer. Oh, did I actually make the call public? Yeah, I may have sent the wrong link. Maybe I sent you guys the wrong link. Hang on. Yeah. Staves has a YouTube link that maybe is better. This is such a mess while we're sorting this out, half on YouTube and half on Twitch. It's crazy. Hey, all right, people are hearing us. Good. Okay. Yeah, so feel free to ask questions. One thing I wanted to mention about Dave's question to Adam about cinematic action and handling that sort of thing. You know, should it be mechanized? Is it a thing the group just deals with? I think Adam covered the question really well. I agree with everything he said, of course, but I would say that setting expectations for that up front when you're starting your campaign is a good idea, but also that conversation doesn't close down. It doesn't have to stop. It doesn't need to necessarily be all set up front and then fixed, right? It can be weird, if you've been playing something a little more serious and then all of a sudden someone wants to do something that's over the top and Fast and Furious or something. But at the same time, you're not beholden to anyone except yourselves. Like, there's this pressure sometimes that we feel as gamers because the fiction is so important, because if you start poking holes in it, that suspension of your disbelief, it can all kind of feel too contrived or kind of fall apart. So we want to be really careful about, we don't want to go against the tone. We don't want to undo that thing that happened before, because the more you do that, like the more wishy-washy the game feels. But just to add on to what Adam said, I would say, don't be afraid of that in general. Don't be afraid of changing things. If you've been playing something that's modern day, paramilitary action or something, and it's been kind of gritty, Bourne Identity, Black Hawk Down kind of cinematic action, and you want to go into Hong Kong cinema stuff and slide down banisters and things, and everyone's really feeling it, go ahead, talk about it and change things up if you want to change things up. And that applies to everything, all types of content. If you want the game, like Adam's Shadowrun game, right? It's slid over into relationship dramas, and that's great, and everyone had fun, and they didn't need to like play Shadowrun right, in order to have fun. They shifted the game over to where they wanted to go. And some games even give you mechanics for this, right? Burning Wheel is the famous example where you write your beliefs, and you can rewrite your beliefs every session of the game. And you can really get on the same page. The GM can help guide that and say, hey, you guys are going to be at court for the next week or so, hanging around waiting for Marcus to heal. We could just do practice and stuff if you want, kind of off screen as downtime. But do you want to do scenes at court? We could do that. You want to write some beliefs about court for this session? We could do some scenes where you talk to some courtiers or some noble members of your family about their situation and stuff. We could do that if you want. And then the mechanics kind of step in Burning Wheel and say, okay, you have a belief about that, and you're gonna earn XP based on that, and yada yada yada. So that can be fun. Don't be afraid to mix things up, is what I'm trying to say. All right, Adam has a question here, I believe, about Blades in the Dark. There was a point in Blades development where nouns were some of the action words, but now they're all verbs. Is the reason for that so you can say you are verbing, you're prowling, or you're skirmishing, or you're swaying? Yeah, that is why. Although that's not a requirement. When people are doing their own hacks, one of the first things I tell them is don't try, like, having them all be active verbs like that is great, obviously, for good, it aims the players in the direction that you're trying to go with that mechanic. But don't worry about making them all verbs. The ones that I had that were nouns, I changed more because they were they read more like goals or outcomes than the thing you were doing. It like murder used to be one of the skills in Blades, because it sounded awesome. Like, I have my murder skill, right? That everybody loved it. It sounds really cool. Well, I guess it depending on what you think is cool. Murder's not cool, kids. But for a criminal, yeah, like Adam in our first series, his character had murder. He had 1 dot in murder. And he was like, I want to use my murder, skill. And that had a nice ring to it. But in practice, it meant that there would be these weird situations where really the intent was murder, and then the action was whatever it was. Like, okay, my intent is to murder, but what I'm doing is I'm sneaking up and like stabbing the dude in the spine. So there's a skill for sneaking around. Shouldn't I be rolling that instead of murder? So it ended up being like, here's what it's called. And then you read the description and it says, yeah, we called it murder because that sounds neat, but this is actually what it means. Like, this is what it covers. And the game still kind of has a little bit of that. It has, the verbs do have certain meanings. Like, you might not immediately get that you use finesse to handle a vehicle or an animal. It makes sense that you're using finesse to drive a carriage or something. But when you see finesse on the list, you might not immediately think like, oh, that's my driving skill, right? So there are still some things you have to kind of learn to associate with the verbs. But it helped the process where, since the players are in charge of what action gets used, and the way you are in charge of that is by deciding what your character does, right? In Blades, you can't say, I'm going to roll prowl. You say, I prowl through the shadows and sneak into the building. And because they're all verbs, it makes it very easy to like choose your skill by saying a sentence that uses that verb. And so we all know this is what your character's doing in the fiction, and this is the dice you're about to roll in the mechanic. So they're connected. So that's why. And Adam and I talked about this a little bit in the hacking Blades in the Dark videos that are on Adam's YouTube channel. The poetry layer jargon that we coined during that. And choosing those words is what that is. Choosing the right poetry for the words of your actions is more important than making sure they're all the same part of speech, or that they all, you want them to have the right flavor, the right vibe. Like all the ones for my game, for the core Blades game, needed to be somewhat archaic. They couldn't be too modern. Like, I love the verb assault. And I have another Blades hack that uses assault as its its main combat thing. And assault and battery. Assault is a crime, and it certainly fit the theme very well. But to our ears, it sounds like a modern kind of legal term or something. So finding the right tone, I feel, is the most important thing. And once you've done that, if you have a few outliers that you just can't corral into being a verb or whatever, but they sound exactly right, they have the right style for your hack, then you should keep them. That's fine. Yeah, Adam saying murder is great, but it puts a lever straight over the fruitful void that's figuring out how to murder your enemies. Yeah, exactly. It was useful in certain circumstances. There are times in Blades where you do want to zoom out and you want to handle something with a die roll that's a little bit bigger scale, and it's not all moment to moment. And so it made sense to say, like, yeah, I murder them, and we just covered it all in one go, and kind of glossed over the details. But yeah, in practice, it was too much. It was too confusing, so it got dropped. And I try to do that with all of them. They're all like what you're doing, and then your goal is the thing. Like, you say what you're trying to accomplish by tinkering or by swaying or by prowling or whatever. And then the GM steps in. So that I think we talked about this last week, but that's the fun tension, right? You say, I want to do X by swaying, and then the GM says that's desperate, risky, controlled. So that the connection, the intent, or the task in Burning Wheel terms, task versus intent. The player does the task and intent, and the GM sets the obstacle. Basically, it's just like Burning Wheel in that sense. Zeke says, I'm super into flashbacks and Blades, but it has a lot of retcon potential. Yes. Do I have advice about playing with a non-linear timeline in the narrative? Yeah, don't do that. Don't try to keep track of separate timelines. And this is something that I'm writing examples for now. And I'm trying to decide like where I'm actually going to fall in terms of how dogmatic the game is, because the game is fairly agnostic about how you use its mechanics. So, we'll see how strongly I put this in the book, but the flashback mechanic is it's the same thing. It's you're doing an action to achieve a goal, and when that happened in the past, you pay stress for it. But we don't sort of like go back to a different timeline and then play out stuff in the past as like a sequence of action or something. We flash back to the moment of you secretly switching the briefcases. But what we definitely don't do is, okay, 2 days ago, you're at home and so-and-so comes to see you and he says hello. And like you start playing out this like splinter timeline from the past. That gets really weird and confusing. And the way to handle it, in my opinion, is to just focus on the action. Think of it like a heist movie. There's this brief, cutaway to the night before when you're bribing the guard and he like gives you the wink and pockets the money. And then now we see like that same guy, at the party, and he like turns his back and you guys, sneak in through the servant's entrance or whatever. That's really the way flashback, like let me put it another way. Instead of don't ever do that, that's the easy, simple way to use flashbacks. So I recommend doing it that way. If you want to go into some keeping track of stuff in the past and everything, you can, I suppose, but that's not really what the mechanics built to support. It's not a multiple timeline game like that. So yeah, let me know if that answers your question. I try to keep the actions to one action. Like a flashback is effectively one roll of the dice, so it's one specific maneuver, so to speak. Yeah, so if we roll sway in a flashback and we have a complication, resolve it in the moment, not in a past scene. Yeah, that's ideal if you can do it. There are times when it's going to make more sense to have the complication also happen in the flashback. But it's nice if you do the sway scene with the guard, giving him the money, and you roll and get a complication, like then you cut back to now and he turns his back and lets you in, and when you go in there, his buddy is in there waiting for you saying like, hey, so Ivan told me that you're giving him a cut. Why don't I get a cut? We're partners. He told me I better take it up with you. And so the complication like manifests right now. And that also, to me, gives it that kind of heist feel too, where everything is snowballing forward and we're not like infinitely regressing backward. And the same thing with wounds and stuff. People always ask like, what if you get hurt? What if you get injured in the past in a flashback? And it's in movies all the time, right? We cut back to the present moment and the guy like suddenly leans on the counter and they leaves a bloody handprint and the rest of the crew is like, what happened? And he's like, I'm fine. He's been hiding his, wound or whatever the whole time. I think those kind of things are fun. It bothers some people. So if it really bothers you, the GM can always choose different consequences for actions. So don't pick ones that are going to annoy you, I guess, is my other piece of advice. Someone had a follow-up question. I don't see it now. Gosuluk is asking, is there a way to keep up with tabletop RPG news? They missed Apocalypse World 2nd Edition and the Sprawl Kickstarters. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard now because there isn't one site anymore. There used to just be Story Games, basically. Story-games.com, which is still there. And it's fine. Like, conversations don't happen as much there as they used to. But it's probably a place to kind of check in every now and then. G Plus is where I do all my gaming connections and notifications and everything. So follow me, follow Adam on G Plus, Sage, Jonathan Walton, Emily and Epi and Meg and Benson Baker, and just look through your game books and look at all the names of like the thank yous and stuff. Jason Morningstar. Follow those people on G Plus, and we're always like promoting everyone's stuff and posting updates and all that kind of thing. So that's probably the best place to follow for tabletop RPG news. There is a YouTube channel. I cannot remember what they're called. They did a little snippet for Blades when it was in Kickstarter. They like keep. They're sort of like a news show about game Kickstarters. If you search on YouTube, you'll probably find it. Look for like role-playing Kickstarter, or if you search Blades in the Dark, it might pop up too. But yeah, there's no like single site anymore to like aggregate gaming news. We pretty much all use G Plus. It's the lair of tabletop role-playing people on the internet now. So yeah, follow all the designer people, and then that'll help probably. Yeah, if you want to ask Blades questions, that's fine with me. I'm always happy to unpack stuff, talk about things. Adam, Shrikecast. That sounds familiar. It might have been Shrikecast is what it's called. Shrike, like the bird. Shrikecast. Yeah, that's true, Golden. Yeah, there are a lot of podcasts. I always forget. I never have time to listen to podcasts. There are a lot of good gaming podcasts. One Roll is one that I'm familiar with. I've listened to a lot. There's so many. I have lists of them, and I just don't have time to listen to them all. Maybe some people in chat can can bring up some of their favorites, and I'll shout them out. D4cast also, people are saying, is good. If you want to listen to games, Gosh Darn Fiasco is really good. Angela Weber from the Double Clicks has a podcast where they play Fiasco. It's called Gosh Darn Fiasco. It's very, very funny. That's a good show. Figure 4, since we're asking Blades questions, is there ever a consequence that a PC can't or shouldn't resist? No, not really. Well, it depends. So that's the answer to everything in Blades, right? It's a game designed to depend on things. There are the time you definitely shouldn't is when, again, it's like choosing consequence in a flashback that doesn't make sense to you. If you as a player like feel weird about resisting a consequence, like it strains disbelief, or you can't wrap your head around how you resist that, then yeah, just take the harm. Like don't. It's hard, I know, because normally as a player, in almost every other role-playing game, you don't have responsibility for the fiction in the same way you do in Blades. So it's okay for you to like weasel out of something and be like, hey, I get a will save because that's what the rule says. Screw you, GM. You can't mind control me. But in Blades, the players have just a share responsibility with the GM for verisimilitude and fictional integrity, or whatever else you want to call it. The GM isn't the storyteller in Blades. So when your character resists something, you tell us, you're the weird ancient ritual is enacted, and all your skin sloughs off, revealing demon scales underneath, and you feel your teeth, grow into fangs, and you start to transform into this creature. And you say, whoa, I resist this consequence. That's your thing to tell us. Like, you're probably going to be rolling resolve, maybe, if it's with your iron will that you somehow resist ancient magics. But that's something we need to understand, right? Like, how on earth can you do that? You're this kid who grew up on the streets of Duskwall. You don't know anything about magic. If there's a reason why you can resist this powerful ancient ritual, tell us all about it. And there's a new thing we're learning about your character, maybe, and, go for it. Great, just do that. But if you just want to stay a normal person who is blindsided by some horrible fate, then don't resist. Don't roll to resist the consequence, suffer the harm or whatever, and maybe get demonified later by figuring out how to reverse it or whatever. So there's nothing mechanically that you can't resist. That's a thing in Blades, because the PCs are massive underdogs, and are in a position to be easily just killed by their enemies. That's a very likely outcome in a lot of Blades games. The bad guys just like burn down your lair and slit your throats in the middle of the night or something. And they can totally do that. But the players can be like, nope, we resist those consequences. They burn down our lair and they try to kill us. They dump our bodies in the river or whatever. We wash up on the shore. My throat's cut now and I can't talk or whatever, but I don't die, or however you want to deal with the resistance of that. So yeah, mechanically you can resist anything, but it's just like performing an action. Your character does a thing to resist it, and we need to know what that is and why it resists the thing that happened. And yeah, I hope that answers your question. Maybe there's more to it. Yeah, and figure 4, some people they just take the harm. I've played with people like that too, where you're like, yeah, you fall and you hear your bones snap as you hit the cobblestones, and they go, yeah, oh man, where do I write that on my sheet? Broken leg, yeah. Some people I'm kind of one of those players. I like to have my characters like kind of ground up and hurt and, struggling with consequences. So yeah, sometimes you'll play with people that just don't resist anything, and they'll just take whatever harm you give, and that's fine. More questions. Input on how to wrap up a campaign. How do you do a finale session effectively? Stani, do you mean for Blades in particular, or just like in general in role playing? I'll start maybe with a more generic answer. For ending a campaign, there's sort of two modes of play. Well, there's more than that. A false dichotomy, but you might play a game, or well, I guess there's three. Let's say there's three. If you play a game that has an arc like Fiasco or something, when you're going to be over. Mouse Guard sort of does that too. You play through the seasons, and you probably have a nice built-in arc. Primetime Adventures has really good mechanics for arcs and when they end. And okay, for any game, yeah. So if you play a game with mechanics, great. That covers that. The other methods are kind of like artificial constraints. We used to do that all the time when we were trying to play as many games as possible. For a few years, I was with a group where we played 3 to 5 sessions of as many games as we could, and we just changed every 3 weeks. So there was no campaign. It was just character creation, 3 sessions. Do we want to do 5? Yeah, okay, then we'll do 5. And then we just stop wherever we were in our story, and then we'd switch games and play a new game. And it was awesome because we literally played every single RPG on the market, pretty much. That was possible to do back then, pretty much, more or less. And it was great. And through doing that over and over again, the need for closure and the need for like campaign arcs and character arcs and stuff just kind of fell away. And I don't really need that anymore. It doesn't matter to me very much. But if that's something that you do want, setting up a number of sessions at the beginning can be really useful, because okay, if we're going to play for 9 sessions, like around session 4 is when, we're going to start heading down. So whatever my arc is going to be, if I'm the outlaw heir and I'm trying to get my throne back and I want to do that in 9 sessions, then, we can kind of like aim for where that's going to hit. I personally don't like that. I don't like to play match like a story shape when I play a role-playing game. I like to just play, and then consequences happen, and then we do the next thing, and consequences happen, and we just follow the chain of consequences wherever it happens to go. So when we play that way, where it's just show up every week and play, and whatever happens, and we follow the consequences, every time we've done that, there's been a clear indication to us that the game ended a session ago or 2 sessions ago. Like, we missed it when it happened, and we kind of kept playing, and then we show up for game night, and everyone's kind of like, yeah, I think that was the end. Like, that whole thing with when the UN troops came in and the Navy was, finally giving us our credit for what we did. Like, I think that was kind of the end. We sort of fizzled out. I don't know. There's nothing new to do. And then you may say, okay, let's fade to black on that. If we want to keep playing this game and we really like these characters, let's fast forward 6 months. Now you've been working for the Navy this whole time, and they've got a new program up and running, and you guys are gonna spearhead this new paramilitary division that they're developing. And you know what I mean? Like, you can just kind of like, okay, that ended, but we still want to keep playing, so we're gonna launch this kind of new direction. I like playing that way. I think it's fun, but also I think it can be like nice as a gamer, or for me anyway, to see those things kind of naturally fade and then play something different and sort of wipe the slate and do something new. So I don't know. Does that answer your question? Oh yeah, Cindy, you're saying especially if you're streaming, right? It's a show. You have viewers. Yes, and that's an excellent point. It's a new thing we have to care about now, right? We used to always say, "Oh, it doesn't matter. There's no audience." It's just, but there is an audience for a lot of these. So yes, in that case, some artificial constraints is a great idea. Like as a GM, I don't like to plot at all and be like, okay, and the episode 5 will be about dealing with the battle station or whatever. I never do that. But if I was running a Twitch show like Balance of Power or something like Adam's doing, that is a show that you're putting on for an audience. So it makes a lot of sense to collaborate with the players and dig in a little bit more than you normally would about their characters. Where do you see this character ending up? What's kind of your goal for their storyline here? Not pre-playing everything and being like, yeah, and then you'll discover that he really was your uncle all along, or none of that. But just like a little lighter, like, okay, you've decided to play this failed Jedi. What are you thinking? Is this a story of redemption for him? Do you think? Is that what the direction you want to go? Are you not interested in that? Do you want to be the washed up old guy that nobody listens to, and you're going to be the mentor figure? Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. Kind of get more on the same page there, and then sort of what we did with the Apocalypse World, the Damp Apocalypse. Pretty much, I think during our setup session, our episode 0 session, we talk about how there's this memory loss problem, and people just forget their pasts, and we all kind of were like, yeah, we're interested in that. Let's dig into that, and that was enough to give the campaign some shape. And then when Andrew's character made it clear that he was gonna like tinker with the psychic maelstrom and like figure out the problem and try to fix it, that became like the arc, right? We're going to follow Andrew's character to the ultimate, resolution of that. And the rest of our characters will kind of orbit around that story. And I think if you're doing a show, that's a really good thing, because I'm sure you know this, Esteni, but you want to be able to market your show, right? You want to be able to say, hey, tune in. It's not just that we're playing Apocalypse World, or that it's a watery Apocalypse World with cool boat chases and stuff. But you want to be able to say, tune in next week, where we learn more about the weird, forgetful, myconid, fungal stuff that's messing with people's brains. And it has this kind of brand, that's easy to hook into. It's easy to tell your friends about the show. It's this crazy apocalypse in the Pacific Northwest with boats and stuff, and everyone's forgetting stuff because of this weird mold that grows everywhere. That's what you want. You want just enough story hook to let the audience in, so they kind of understand what it's about. So yeah, I don't know. That's a long rambling answer. I'm not an expert in that. As a GM, I always stay very far away from story shapes or plotting out arcs or figuring out future things. I have a story about that. The ice giants. Remind me to tell the ice giant story. I'll get around to that at some point. But yeah, I would say that I think Adam is very good at that. So check out Mirror Shades. I'm sure you already have, but Mirror Shades and Swan Song, and now Balance of Power. You're gonna see him do that, because he's a GM like I am. He doesn't want to plot anything out either, but he's doing those light touches to put some kind of wrapper on what the game is, and arrange a story, without. Yeah, Mirror Shades is probably the best example, because Hadia is that thing, the story element that Adam didn't pre-plan where all that was going to go, but bringing her in as a figure to wrap the game around, it just gave it a nice brand element, for lack of a better word. So there's a bunch more questions. I'm going to roll back here and get to some of them. Let's see. What sort of third-party content do I envision for Blades? Yeah, there'll be there's some hacks that haven't been announced yet that are in the works that are going to be pretty cool. There are a few like official supplement-y kind of things, like some comic books and that sort of stuff that are going to use Blades as their game system. I can't announce those things yet. Those are other people's projects, but they're in the works and they're going to be pretty awesome. And then there will be my own core supplements to the game. I have the like what you do in core Blades when you're not in Duskwall. Like, you know, if you're in the West in Severos and you're in one of the Horse Lord tribes, riding in the Deathlands with your ghost hunting steeds and stuff, like taking the Blades mechanics and using them to like promote your tribe's welfare and, you know, prosper, staying free from the city states of the Empire, and, you know, all what you would expect. Like, instead of your crew sheet, you have your tribe, and so each area in the Blades setting kind of has that thing. In the Dagger Isles, there's Corsairs and pirate ships and stuff. In the north, in Skovlan, there's the actually there's I can't talk about Skovlan yet. And then in Eruvia, there's the sort of war of the houses, noble assassination game stuff. The Dune kind of stuff happens down there. So I'll be making supplements for those. That'll be fairly compact, but they'll give you more new maps, new NPCs and factions and situations and crew sheets and all that. So I'm making those. And yeah, then there's a bunch of playsets and reskins, and then the SRD will come out hopefully later this summer, and everyone can make powered by Blades stuff, whatever we're going to call that, and make your own products with that. How does Blades test with people new to RPGs? I don't know. I've run it for people who are fairly new, but I'm good at running Blades in the dark, so it wasn't a problem. They didn't have a problem with it. I would say not ideal first game, maybe. Lady Blackbird's probably a better choice, but I started with Gamma World, and it was like really complicated and weird, and it was fine. I was 10 years old, so it didn't bother me. So I don't know. I think what matters more is it a genre and setting that excites them, and is it a game you can run well? And if those are true, then you can pick any game for a first time game. Adam says, I keep forgetting to make clocks. I keep doing only 1 or 2 per session and handling everything else in my own head. Yeah, that's fine. I that's what I do too. I mean, if that's causing a problem, if you're like, oh, I should have had a clock for that because I forgot about it, then yeah, you should make more. Playing on a table makes it a lot easier. Online, it's hard. The making a clock is awkward. Drawing one. Eric Bulgaris has some pre-made ones that he keeps on the Roll20, matte screen that are just sitting there empty. I think I'm going to start doing that because that definitely helps. I normally have like index cards sitting around, and I'm always just drawing one real fast and putting it out on the table. So that helps me make them. Maybe I should just sit there with index cards when I run it online too. Let's see, Zeke. You moved on to version 6 of the Blades Quick Start. It seems like Blades is moving into more of a guide to Duskwall instead of a list of vague descriptors to work with. What brought on the specifics and factions and named NPCs and the like? Yeah, those are all, they've always existed. You guys just haven't seen them. They come from, I ran a Blades campaign that was like 2 years long, and all that stuff was generated. And it's been a process of me like paring it down to just enough stuff. Like, and most people just need the list. They just need, you know, Lord Skurlock, Demmer Sisters, Ulf, etc. The Unseen. That's all you need. You see the Unseen and you go, okay, yeah, I can run that. But I'm trying to hit this middle ground where there's just a little bit more. There's like a list of names for that faction. There's a clock that they're working on, and there's a situation. So if you don't have an idea for the Fire Brigade faction and you flip to that, it'll say, you know, currently the Fire Brigade is, you know, basically at war with this other faction for this reason, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I never want to make the, like, the Forgotten Realms of Duskfall. Like, you know, I want it to be very broad, but really shallow. So it's super easy to do whatever you want to with it. And that sort of comes from that's my background as a designer, right? Lady Blackbird is like that. It has 5 specific characters with specific traits and everything, but what you do with them and what their histories really are and all that stuff is just totally up to you. So the Blade stuff is like that too. I'm trying to provide enough content so you can have a city, you know, that's like populated, and when they go down some street and deal with some random new situation, it's easier for the GM to just go, oh, this will do. I'll just grab this thing that John already made up. But it gives you permission to just mix and match and mash stuff together, and you don't have to feel like, oh wait, it said in there who the lieutenant of the 4th watch station in Charter Hall is. I need to go look it up in the book and make sure I get the right guy or whatever. So yeah, trying to keep it really shallow. But with city and sandbox games especially, you want to be able to, if you don't have something off the top of your head as the GM, it's nice to be able to just flip some to a page and get some sparks of ideas or material to play around with. But none of it is foundational, right? Like if you don't use the situation that I've written for Lord Skurlock in his little faction blurb, it won't matter. It's all just a toolbox. That's the idea anyway. Care to offer a second opinion about getting better at scene framing? Yeah, I mean, what Adam said. Think cinematically. Ask the player where we might find them, what they're up to, what they're doing, what they're interested in, and then look inside your mental toolbox of places, your concept art and your movies, and describe one of those pieces that you're seeing in your head briefly, and that'll get the ball rolling. If they say, yeah, now that I know that the witch lives in Char Hollow, I'm going to go down there and confront her. I know where she does her business. And so you go, yeah, so like the petrified trees that have been there since the Cataclysm, they're like indestructible, these gray, stony trees with branches, no leaves, and people have had to sort of build around them. So there's trees like jutting up through buildings and stuff. And one of the biggest trees has this huge, like knotted opening in the bottom of it. And the witch has like built her little lair inside there, strung with beads and all these curtains and incense billowing out the bottom. And there's usually a queue of locals kind of waiting outside for her attention. And so there's your frame. But to me, it's less like I need to invent the perfect thing here, and more like I've spent a lot of time consuming all this media and playing all these video games and looking at all this artwork. So let me just like rifle through and see what comes to me, and then just describe it. So it's like, it's the mind palace, right? You're not authoring something as a writer necessarily. It's more like, and this is true of all fictional positioning, by the way. This is like how I like to do it. It's less of a creative thing to me and more of just a descriptive action. You know, if someone says, well, are there ladders in here? Instead of thinking, oh, should there be ladders? Would it be cool for there to be ladders? Will someone get an advantage or a disadvantage if I put a ladder in this combat? Or what? Forget all that. Just like think like, okay, it's this old time apothecary shop with all the like tall shelving and all the little like drawers for all the herbs. Yeah, they totally have ladders that are on those rails. Yeah, it has ladders. So that's how I like to do scene framing too, is just kind of look at the picture and then describe it. Oh man, lots of questions. I'll try to get through. We need to quit soon, so Adam, we can go watch Adam play Dark Souls. What do I think about Balance of Power having 2 separate groups? Yeah, so I did that. I ran a 100-session long Apocalypse World series. That was about, it was almost 50-50, 50 sessions, but the groups kind of overlapped. I had 3 groups at the beginning that were all in the same world. And then over time, one of those groups kind of got merged into the another one. And then over time, they were at the north and south ends of the world, and they started to overlap. And there were a few weeks of play where it looked like the PCs might cross paths, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to handle that. I haven't decided yet. So I said, hey, we should I'll go out. Let's go out to the bar and like both groups, all of us together, and just talk about the games and what's going on and plan for the future. What do you guys want to do? You know, if this happens. And we had a great time, and people were all sharing stories of what they'd done. And, you know, one group was saying, oh, that was you guys. Oh man, we had no idea like why the lighthouse suddenly went dark and all that stuff. So that was really fun. But during those conversations, the players they jumped ships. Ryan was like, oh, I think I should go to their game, you know, and so the groups like shifted casts around because some characters were headed in, you know, towards what the other group was currently doing, and vice versa. And so we kept doing two parallel groups, but with shifting casts. One of the players made a second character, which is a thing you can do in Apocalypse World, and then his second character became an NPC in the other group. So it was complicated and crazy, and ultimately it ended up with all of us playing together and kind of wrapping up the series in this big finale event on purpose. Speaking to Esteni's question again, like we decided like we got to end this. This is crazy. It's just too complicated to keep it going. So yeah, I think it's awesome. I love Balance of Power. It's a great idea. I loved doing it in Apocalypse World, and I would totally do it again. I guess, yeah, I sort of am in a way with some Blade stuff actually, but yeah, it's great. I highly recommend it. It's super fun. So yeah, Figure 4. I mentioned comic books. There's no Blades comic book coming. Someone who's has their own comic book, this really cool comic. They're doing a role-playing game, and they want to use Blades for the system. There is a Blades in the Dark novel though coming out next year, possibly 2. Not sure yet, but there's definitely one coming around. Golden wants to know if I have any extended rules for faction advancement planned. There is a supplement. I have another project that I want to do next year that uses the Blades in the Dark rules system as its base. It's a totally different setting. And it sort of calls for bigger faction stuff, like past tier 5 or whatever. And yeah, it's obvious. It's nothing too crazy. Like it just gives you a way to organize when you have groups of factions. You have alliances, or I can't even remember what I'm calling the other ones now, but yeah, a way to, because this game is set in the real world, and it needs a way sometimes for you to judge, like, what's the Chinese military doing, and, and that's a bigger thing than just like the local Chinese Navy stuff that's happening in your game. So yeah, it's what you would expect. It's just a higher order organization where you sort of reset the tier scales, and nothing too crazy there. Any more questions? We're just about out of time. Adam says, I've been meditating on how to handle multi-group play for Blades, and one thing I've been thinking about to avoid inter-crew combat is having crews do scores to buy an extra entanglement to throw at the other crew. That's fun. Yeah. Yeah, I think, you can decide, right? You either really try to like make those parallel groups really interact PC to PC, and I think that's what Balance of Power is doing, sort of, although they're not in direct contact. But the thing that happened in our Apocalypse World game that was interesting was I was sort of treating the one PC group as threats in the other people's game. So they were sort of NPCs that I didn't have to decide what they did or what type of people they were or anything. So it made it kind of a lot easier to run, in a sense, because when I was playing the Northern group, I didn't have to prep. I didn't have to be like, okay, what's the Lighthouse Front up to? What essential threat are they? What are their threat moves? How is their, Doom countdown clock going? How is the cult growth expanding? Da 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 da. All of that stuff happened in the game 2 nights before with the other PCs. So I could just tell, transmit that information the way that they would get it. They can see one night that the lighthouse is out, the light is gone. And then shortly after that, some refugees start arriving with these crazy stories. And then vice versa. Like the North group did a bunch of stuff at the old airfield and crazy shit went down. And so in the Southern group's game, all that sort of threat stuff that you would normally do in Apocalypse World just got informed by the other group. And I think you could easily do that in Blades too. You could use the actions of the other PC group, take their gang or whatever and use them as an NPC faction in the one game. So it's not like they're necessarily in the same game together. They're just like in the same world. They're in the same situation, and you're using one group's actions to feed into the sandbox of the other group. That seems like an easy way to do it to me. Anyway, easy, take a lot of notes, a lot of GM notes. That's the key to that. Although if you're playing online, man, that's the best, because you just go back and you just watch the video. It's so handy. Okay, that looks like we are running out of questions. Thanks for hanging out and asking questions, guys. It's really fun. I love talking about that kind of stuff. Oh, let me tell the Ice Giant story. It's really short. The best thing that ever happened to me as a GM. I started running games. Like I said, I was like 10. And I had played a role-playing game one time and then decided to run a game. And I was a shitty GM for a long time. And then I forget how old we were, like 12 maybe. I forget how old, but I was going to run Talaslanta, and it was set in the north where the Ice Giant War was going on. And they said, yeah, we'll be mercenaries. Let's go up north. So I wrote the whole campaign out in my notebook, like everything that would ever happen in the game. I wrote it all out. Then they go here, then they do this, then they meet this guy, filled a notebook, just filled it with the campaign. And I was so excited to run it for them, to run them through it, right? And they went up, they fought some ice giants on the first day. They got hired by the Ice Kingdom and sent in to do the thing. They fought an ice giant and they almost died. And they were like, nope, we're out. We're not fighting ice giants. This is bullshit. This is in Talaslanta, by the way. It's second edition back then. And they're like, no, we this is a bad idea. We don't want to be ice giant mercenaries. We leave. And I'm sitting there with my giant notebook. And so I say, yeah, you go back to get the schooner to go home, but you're socked in. There's a blizzard, and you can't leave because of the blizzard. And my friend Chris, who was one of the players in the game, looked me right in the eye and he said, no, there isn't. There's no blizzard. We leave. And that was that. That made me a much better GM. I tried to railroad them. I tried to force them to play through my bullshit, and they just said no. So the only answer to that is to say, okay, what do you want to do? And then follow, see where the PCs go and what they do. So thank you to Chris Holmes long ago for making me a better GM. All right, let's wrap it up, guys. Thanks for coming by. Thanks for chatting. Thanks for asking questions. Let's watch Adam play some Dark Souls. It's going to be awesome. Peace out.